Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first workshop of the Women as IPM Leaders program under the ASEAN Action Plan on Fall Armyworm. My name is Alison Watson, and I'll be moderating this session. Firstly, I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and I'd also like to thank the really smart, talented group of people who have helped develop this work program and this workshop with me. And we have a wonderful lineup of speakers today as well. So before we start, I'd just like to go over the ways that you can interact on the Zoom platform today. The key message is that we really want to hear all your questions and we'll make plenty of time to answer those. So please put all your questions in the Q&A box. That really helps us to manage the session. If you want to share any research links, make general comments, thank a speaker, really start an interactive discussion, please put all that into the chat box. And so we really encourage that as well. Technical problems, you can send a message to Grow Asia in the chat box. And I do have Pranav helping on the back end today, so he'll be able to help you with any technical issues you do have. A reminder also that there will be a recording of this workshop, and I'll send all participants today a copy of that recording and a PDF of the presentations by next week. Now, so I just want to introduce one of our leaders, I guess, one of the great women that are working in the IPM sector, and this is Melissa Montecalvo, and she is from the Philippines, and she actually features in our blog series. So we're really making an effort to draw attention to people who are working in IPM across the region. And as I said before, if you're a little bit late coming on, please introduce yourself in the chat box so that we can actually share and understand who is in the room. And please also share any tips you have for increasing participation for women in your projects and training. For example, I had an example that somebody gave me, which was providing training, childcare at training events really helped to enable women to attend our events. So if you've got any great tips like that, please share them in the chat box. Now, today's session is really busy. We're lucky enough to have some really outstanding and inspiring speakers and panelists joining us from across the region and further afield. The session is really meant to be really busy, fast-paced, but with lots of time for discussion. So don't forget to ask questions to our speakers, Nicoline, Nozomi, Revi, and Thelma, and also to our panelists, Kim, Sylvie, Wilma, and Erwina, and share your experiences again in the chat. Now, the Women as IPM Leaders program has been developed to help better support the important role of women in driving sustainable plant health and plant disease and pest management control across the region. This program, broken up into 5 components, will explore levers for change to better equip women in plant health tactics, as well as to identify and promote ways to strengthen the capacity of women farmers and leaders in the Southeast Asian region, according to their needs. This program is not pest specific, it's not crop specific. We're deliberately interested in a systems approach that considers women's roles in IPM across diverse crop management and value chain systems, and also recognizes that the roles of women as part of a family farming unit are also very diverse and often multi-crop focused. If you'd like more information about the program, please visit the program page at ASEAN Fall Armyworm Action Women as IPM Leaders. Now, more work will be coming out over the next couple of months. In the meantime, if you do want to be involved, please contact us or engage in the forum discussion page where you can leave your feedback and ideas and share them with the community. And this forum page is very easy to enter. All you have to do is go to aseanfawaction.org, go to community, click forum, and 3, you'll see a lovely picture there and a title, Women as IPM Leaders. Click on that and you can go in and leave your comments and thoughts and share them with the community. Now, over the next couple of months, over the last couple of months, we've also been drawing attention to the leaders we have in the region already working hard on supporting integrated pest management across our crop value chains. These include researchers like Dr. Dinasi Dipatanasari, who's featured in one of our blogs. And also Marcela Navasiro from the Philippines, who has worked for many decades nurturing new generation of researchers, but also furthering knowledge of how to implement IPM in the field. And we also have Lisette Lacambra joining us today on the panel. Oh, actually, she's not joining us on the panel, but she's definitely in the background there, I'm sure, listening right now. And I just wanted to draw attention to her. She's helped us a lot on this program, and she's out there working with farmers, developing extension and training materials. And we're often shy about celebrating our efforts, but it's really important to celebrate and draw attention to the important work that we do so that we can also learn from our collective experiences and see strong role models working in this important area of sustainability. So let's celebrate the contribution of women across Southeast Asia in integrated pest management. If you know of someone who's helping to contribute to transformative IPM activities and you think they'd be open to being interviewed, please contact us so that we can have those people featured in our blog series and draw attention to their great work. That brings me now to the pleasure of introducing our first speaker, Dr. Nicoline de Haan. Nicoline, is the director of the CGIAR Gender Platform and has joined us today to start our workshop with some introductory thoughts on why generating evidence and new direction for equitable results are needed. Welcome, Nicoline.
Thank you, Alison. Thanks especially for giving me this opportunity to provide a few introductory thoughts and framing of the session today. First of all, it's an honor. I'm inspired when I look at all the people showing up. I'm inspired on the very amazing combination of gender people, but also technical people. And I always say, when you combine the two, that's where change happens. So I'm very inspired on what you guys are trying to do. It's very close to my heart and also very close to what we try to do within the gender platform. So the gender platform was set up to work across all the CGIAR 14 different agricultural centers. And it was meant to actually highlight the issues that gender issues across in agriculture. So to really see how we can leverage the technologies for women. And I think that's exactly what you guys are doing. So again, like I say, very inspiring. We think of it in two ways. We have two pathways of how we look at gender in agriculture. The first pathway is we are already aware that women are doing a lot of the labor and a lot of the work in agriculture. So isn't it about time we give them the right tools? So that's a very clear, direct way that we want to work with the technical scientists to make sure that we actually produce the technologies that women can use, but also that they want. Because most of the time, when we've developed technology, we've looked at the problem and then developed the answer, but we haven't really asked the people who are going to implement it. So that's one thing we really try to do very hard. Then the other area that we're moving in more and more towards, which we also find very important, is how can we make sure that agriculture actually empowers women and in the process their family and in the process their community. So how can we make sure that by giving them opportunities in agriculture, they actually get empowered and in the process become part of the conversation about agriculture? Because often, especially with climate change and things like that happening, we notice that women, they have solutions, but they're not heard. And so how can we actually make sure that they get heard in the process as well? So those are the two bigger themes that we really try to push. And again, I see that reflected in the work that you guys are trying to do as well. We do it through three different ways. We make sure we have evidence. We provide evidence for all the policymakers, for everybody, because we still notice that often the data is not there. And again, this is what you're trying to find out. And I think especially my understanding, the limited work I've done with IPM, which was in West Africa way back, is that there's still not a very clear understanding what exactly the roles are, what exactly the labor implications are, etc. So we need that very clearly. And part of it is because of two things. One, women are often invisible. Most of the labor they do is informal, is not, seen in the data. So we need to make sure that women become more visible in it. And two, gender is often, and the whole thing around women is often very emotive. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody knows something about their mother, their sister, whatnot more. We need the data to support it. We need to move beyond becoming emotive and beyond being just advocates. We need the data to show the positiveness and how women are engaged and what their own, needs are in that process. Two, we also need to start showing much more intentionality. And again, this is what this project is doing. We all know that gender is important, but we're not being very intentional about it. So how do we actually look at it and be very intentional about, look, okay, we need to pay attention to this. And only that way will things change again. And in that process, by becoming intentional, we also start understanding, well, if we really want to change something, we need to get the men on board, we need to get the whole system to change. And that's where we start talking about gender transformative approaches and how do we actually change things. And I'll just use a very simple example, mostly from livestock where I'm more familiar, is if we want to get vaccines out into the field. Some cases we will need to use a motorbike and women are not allowed to use a motorbike. How do we change societies to understand that, giving women a motorbike is only going to improve the situation for everyone? How do we change those norms and values in a way that's positive, that doesn't work against people in the community? So we need to become much more intentional. Then the last thing I would request of this project as well is to develop investable options for women by women. So let's find solutions for women in the process. We need the data, we need to be intentional, but we also need to get solutions. We can't only just keep on looking at and analyzing. We need to figure out, and that's by listening to women, by listening to men, by listening across between the gender people and the technical people. We need to do all that together. And again, I see this project as being one of those areas where we're going to do that, and where hopefully we will have change happen. So I look forward to being continuously engaged. And if there's anything we can do, please just let us know. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nicoline. That was a great start. And I think you've really put out a few things there that we're very interested in focusing on, but very succinctly around needing good data, good understanding what's happening out there, being intentional about our work, and really investing in solutions for women as well, and developing those with women and male farmers. So ensuring that they're there and used for women farmers and by women farmers. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for introducing our session. I hope you can stay with us for the rest of the session, and please feel free to engage in the chat, which I'm sure there will be a lot of. So thank you very much, Nicoline. So I'd now like to introduce Dr. Nozomi Kawarazuka from the International Potato Center in Vietnam. And she's been doing a lot of work in this area. And this is a great start too, because she's really going to provide a bit of a foundation for our thinking and discussion today. So Nozomi, welcome. And I'm just going to ask if you can load your presentation, or I can present if you would like.
Can you stop sharing?
I can.
Okay. Then I think still, I say, okay, yes.
Perfect.
Can you see it now?
Perfectly, thank you.
Okay, something is disturbing me. So hi everyone. I'm going to talk about pest and disease from a gender perspective. I put some key messages in this presentation. I'm very happy to see many participants from across these regions. So the first thing I want to clarify is what women's IPM leaders means about. I think this is about facilitating enabling environment for women in relevant gender context and crop systems and practice that women closely engage with. So there is one of the feminist critic is that development, often we use women as a tool for development, adding more labor burden, time burdens on women to achieve your project goals, which we are not aiming at. So let's go for the former supporting, facilitating the environment. So now let's have a critical gender lens. By the end of this presentation, you will see the world differently. So why gender in IPM? Let's look at research on gender and COVID. Coronavirus face masks, why men are less likely to wear masks. Female-led countries handled COVID better. Women research plummet during lockdown, while men's submission of manuscript increased. Actually, these are very typical social science research. And this can be applied for plant disease and pest. The first study is about understanding gendered behaviors and perception about a disease. By doing so, we can have more target strategies and incentives for specific groups. The second one is gendered decision-making over measures against the disease. This can be applied for household decision-making who are influential in making decisions on changes. The last one is gendered impact of outbreak of a disease. Always a disease crisis bring unequal impact and subsequent consequence between men and women and different social groups. So it is very important, both positive and negative and intended consequences to measure. So key message here, social science can contribute understanding gendered behaviors, decision-making, and impact, which is very important for IPM. So while there are global patterns of gender, gender relations in the context in Southeast Asia is so diverse. So entry point to look at can be in your communities, engaging communities. Are they patriarchal or matrilineal and matrilocal, ethnic majority or minorities? Do men migrate or women migrate? Is it rice-based culture or mountain agriculture? Various religions, all those aspects shape gender relations and context. So key message here is that we need various options to support women IPM depending on their gender and social context. There is no single prescription or manual to address gender in IPM. This is a big difference with the crop. There is some methods that you can use across the world. So now I'm going to explain gender-blinded data that makes women invisible. I show some results. You may be shocked. So first, you ask, how do farmers spend their 24 hours? Without critical gender lens, you can only understand that farmers work 8 to 9 hours in the field and doing domestic work around average 4 hours. This is the data from Vietnam, northern Vietnam. With a gender disaggregated data, we can find that both men and women work more than 8 hours, similar hours, while women sleep 2 hours less and do 4 hours more domestic work. This is data from northern Vietnam, but I have many similar data from across the world. Men's sleeping time is including men sleeping in the morning because of the drinking alcohol at night. So key message here is that labor and time-saving technologies are required for women farmers if we are neglecting this issue of domestic work. So next question is, what are major constraints of farmers on adapting new agriculture innovation? We often talk about economic aspect, lack of capital to invest, lack of market to sell high quality produce, a lack of guarantee for selling prices. This is very well known. But our data in Genovate across the world shows that those three constraints are mostly come from men. Women's constraints are diverse across the world and very different. But the three common aspects are disagreement with husband, time and labor shortage, and fear of failure, that being criticized by husband or mother-in-law. Key message here is that underlying constraints of adoption of technology are not necessarily economic for women. If you only do economic studies, you might miss important factors that women are constrained. So next question, how many days of labor did your household spend for a recommended agronomic practice? In IPM, labor is a concern, and the new recommended method can save household laborer 50% compared to traditional method. This is really great, fantastic. Then farmers can adapt and we can scale these innovations. But if you ask whose labor increased and decreased by new IPM practice, this is fake fiction data, but it can be like men benefit from reducing labor while women are not benefiting. This can happen because many labor-saving technologies are uptaken by men. So key message here is that gender-blinded data can mute women's labor burden and reinforce gender gaps because you are unintentionally supporting men and increasing women's burden, or women's burden doesn't change. Have you got a gender lens? Now you will take a test. So in X province in South Vietnam, the overuse of pesticide was a problem. It was usually men who spray pesticides, while women work in garment factories. Therefore, men were invited for training of appropriate pesticide use. However, the men who attended training didn't change their practice. Why? This was a real story for the cassava farmers in South Vietnam. Do you know why? Can you guess? This is a gender issues. So the reason was because it was women who play hidden but significant roles. Women do decisions on what and how much pesticide to purchase. And also women are controlling the household budget, including income from agriculture. So women are very much concerned the impact of pests. So they are trying to prevent pests and improve yield. So without this key message here is understanding gender roles alone is not sufficient. Who do the work is not really an influential person, maybe. So we need to understand household decision making. This is an extreme example, but the opposite can often happen. So it is women who are looking after plants. However, decision makers are men. So even if you train women, they cannot make changes. You have to convince a husband. Okay, so decision making is a tricky one and really diverse. This is the gender patterns of decision making in sweet potato production in Vietnam. In the same country and the same cropping systems. However, in some areas, men are decision makers. Blue is men, pink is women, and gray are joint decisions. So some areas, especially like Vietnam and London, they grow sweet potato as a cash crop export, while the rest of 3 provinces, they grow sweet potatoes for local market and animal feedings. So who decide? It's diverse, depends on the culture as well as cash crop systems. And men tend to take over decision-making power in commercialization. So one more thing I want to talk that Nicoline also mentioned. How can we know women are empowered through this program? Is women's feeling of empowerment the same as men? So our research from Genovate, we asked what makes you feel empowered across the world, from Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Men say that economic success and material wealth that make them feel empowered. The feeling is universal, while women's feeling of empowerment are diverse across the world. For example, in Africa, some countries in Africa, economic independence is very important, while in Bangladesh, subjective power and confidence is important. Even they don't have income, even they don't have restricted mobility. If you can feel inside that I have power and negotiate, then that is a very much achievement for them. While in Vietnam, this is central coast of Vietnam, husband's appreciation and recognition from their family members, that is important. women are not aspired to reach as strong power as men because that causes backlash. So women prefer to be that recognition is very important for them. So key message here, economic indicators such as income and yield are not sufficient to assess women's empowerment. So this is the last topic. I did a brief gender and IPDM literature review. I'm going to summarize a bit. So first is that gender norms and relations significantly influence farmers' practice and the choice of crop protection technologies. There are plenty of evidence. Second, women farmers have lower technology adoption rates than men farmers. Third, women have less access to and benefit from digital technologies. Agriculture programs that have a clear target to engage women can significantly improve women's access to extension services. This does not have to be traditional extension services, but like plant doctors, female women self-help groups, or through the video and mobile technologies. The last, the impact of IPDM innovations on gender, like gendered women's labor, time, decisions, expenditure, and empowerment is understudied, except a few gender-focused impact assessment. So key part we have to address is that when we develop, as Nicoline said, we need consultation with women in technology development and adoption. Also, we may need alternative to individual smartphones because women still don't have and they don't know how to use it. So if you only support digital technologies in current status, you only tend to support men and rich women. So the last part is we need innovations in evaluation methods, not only traditional crop yield incomes, but also how women feel, how they changed. That measurement also needs to be diversified. So we have further reading. You can Google search RTV gender portal. There are some publications and tools. This is reference. So my last message is that the critical gender lens is a weapon to transform agriculture for the poor, both women and men. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nozomi. That was a wonderful presentation. And I think that's evidenced by the huge amount of chat in the chat box. Really great discussion happening in the background and lots of people agreeing with you and also giving examples. So you've got some wonderful feedback there from the chat and great discussion that you've started. I'm going to do some quick questions because we're sort of quite tight on time, but I'm going to invite you back to the panel as well. But a question for you, what do you think are some of the challenges you face in integrating gender in IPM research and interventions?
Thank you, Alison. I think we have many challenges, but one thing is that all project members have to have a same understanding on gender and the same goals. It is very difficult. We work together with biophysical scientists who are looking at crops, who are looking at crop diseases, and economists who are looking at the economic impact, and social scientists who are looking at people. So, and we use different languages, different approaches, and different even communications. So it is a challenge, but if you have a great leadership in project leader to support and forming a team with the same understanding, then we can move very quickly. I think plant health is a bit lag behind in terms of gender integration compared to, for example, value chains, post-harvest technologies, even seed systems that have been advanced. I think one of the reasons is that we sometimes assume pest control is men's jobs. So somehow we assume women are not very relevant. But as you will show later, We have to update these assumptions because the world is changing, especially in Southeast Asia. Women are playing critical roles in crop protection areas. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Nozomi. That's a perfect actually answer, particularly as I'm going to talk about the survey that we have just conducted, and you've raised lots of points in there. Just a great presentation. There's so much food for thought in that presentation as well, and you've really engaged the audience. There's a lot in the chat, so if I could ask you to join the chat and please feel free to sort of stimulate more discussion and share your thoughts, that would be perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to move on to the next presentation. I'm just going to move quickly through Nozomi's presentation here because I've just changed the slides. And I'm going to start talking about a really important activity that we carried out in November, and Nozomi was a key player in this. We wanted to collect some thoughts from the region, and it's not 96 farmers, it's actually 94. So I'm sorry, I've made a slight mistake, which will update in the slide set. But we did survey actually 94 farmers across 5 countries in November 2021. And the aim was to really undertake a brief survey to gather different views and perspectives on the roles of women and men. And we really wanted to hear farmers' views on what might be important to them. And given the time challenges and the difficulties getting on the ground at this time, these survey results, they're not meant to be a comprehensive report. They're really to seek an initial glimpse of the diversity of views from farmers and their roles, and some potential ideas for more robust follow-up, and to really challenge some of those assumptions and some of those points that Nozomi pointed out that were important for us to have more information on. So I'd like to give a special thanks to the people who really helped draft the survey from across the various institutions, and especially IDE, the International Potato Centre, IRI and East West Seed for their help with the data collection. Now, looking at the survey, who are our survey respondents? We had 94 responses with around a 74-26 split of female and male participants from across 5 countries. The majority of participants are working on farm sizes of less than 2 hectares, and almost all are directly involved in plant pest and disease management. When asked if they had the main responsibility for household duties and childcare, and I saw there was a bit of discussion on this in the chat, 61% of the women respondents said they had the main responsibility, with quite a large 37% though saying that these duties were shared. 45% of the male respondents also said that they shared the main duties. There was also a difference across countries. The Philippines was one country where the response for sharing these roles was much higher than the women respondents who had the main responsibility. So that was very interesting. Now, we wanted to get an idea on the crops grown in the family unit versus the crops that respondents were most involved in individually. A few brief points. Firstly, the diversity of crops grown is quite insightful. Respondents' family members are really involved in a number of crops, but also livestock and poultry and fish and aquaculture. So these smallholder farming units or families are therefore involved in multiple different crop and agricultural activities, often at the same time. Secondly, women's participation was still strong at an individual level across crops, although there was a significant drop in relation to their individual role in fruit production, which almost halved, and to a lesser degree, a drop in maize farming, indicating women played a bit less roles in these crops than their other members of their family unit. This was perhaps less pronounced than expected for maize, given the anecdotal evidence that women don't play a large role in maize farming, suggesting the need for better analysis of this in our future studies. Interestingly, there was also a significant drop in involvement in poultry farming at an individual level. So I'd be really interested in comments from the audience here. What do you observe, or what have you observed as the different activities and crops that women are most involved in? So please share that in the chat. Now, this was really an interesting piece of the survey. Some anecdotal feedback we heard was that women were not largely involved in pesticide decision-making, and I think Nozomi pointed that out in a previous slide. But the results were somewhat surprising, with women actually involved across a broad range of activities. 57% of the women were involved in decisions on where, what, and how much chemical pesticides to buy, and 41% were actually involved in purchasing. There are some important points to follow up here. Interesting to note was the role of women also in washing of pesticide contaminated clothing, 44%, which could be an important aspect for better health and safety training, along with the quite high number of women involved in mixing and preparing pesticides. So more work on the role and the need for education for women related to pesticide decision making is likely a really important area to follow up on. Now, the next slide talks about, and I just will move it. The next slide, we wanted to know where farmers got most of their information on plant pest and disease management from. And we asked them to tell us the top 3 sources of information. A couple of key takeaways here. Women are really seeking information from a diverse range of stakeholders, with women appearing to gather information to a higher degree from more diverse sources than their male counterparts. They also really discuss this with their partner and husband. Women tended to strongly seek information from friends and neighbours and government officials and information sites. Men most preferred pesticide sellers for information. However, I will just say this is a very small set of individuals, particularly of the male respondents. So this is something that we need to follow up on to get more information and data, which is a really important point that Nicoline stated at the very start of her introduction. Now, we also asked farmers whether they thought women have more, less, or the same knowledge on pest and disease control compared to husband or male partners or male counterparts. There was a strong response for the same information, or actually even women said they had more information. So that's great to hear. Interestingly, only farmers from Cambodia and Vietnam, however, gave responses which stated that women had less knowledge. So that could be an interesting national level I guess, point to follow up on. Now, this is a really interesting piece because we asked if women have a leadership role in pest and disease management in your community, what changes could we expect? We had many comments on this, which was really informative. I won't go into detail, but there's some great feedback. And here, read the demand amongst women for more knowledge on pest and disease management to help their families in various aspects, from increasing yield, health and safety, time, and taking leadership roles to teach others. And here is some more feedback on the next page from other countries. We have Philippines, Indonesia, and Myanmar, with a lot of demand for change regarding the use around pesticides or information. And now feedback from Vietnam. So you can see we've got some really good information coming back that we can build off on. We also asked about access to training compared to male farmers. This showed that many felt there was the same access to training, even many saying there was more access compared to men. Interestingly, Cambodia and Vietnam had the most responses that indicated there was less access to training. So that's another national level point to follow up on. The results showed that a significant number of respondents did not have internet access when we asked their access to phone and internet. And this was because they either had no smartphone or no internet, particularly in Indonesia and Cambodia. So it's good not to assume, therefore, even in Asia, where phone ownership is fairly high, that women farmers have access to smartphones and internet access. And so while most may have a phone, it's not necessarily a smartphone. And this is an important aspect for designing communication strategies and outreach. The last questions that we asked was, do you believe there are technologies that could make your role in growing or selling crops easier? And do you believe that if you had more information and training about new practices and diseases and knowledge on managing plant pests and diseases, would it make your role easier? What we had here is a great majority saying yes to both. Very interesting results across the board. We have to do a lot more analysis. We actually only got the full results at the end of last week, so we haven't had a lot of time to analyze them, but it's a very good foundation to start thinking about what we need to do. And I think the food for thought really here is around the context is important. There's real diversity across the region. We need to really make sure we don't just make assumptions without having the data. We really need to understand the needs and perceptions of the community of farmers, and we need to know more about that. We also need to understand how decision-making is being carried out and points for directing interventions to help support farmers. and acknowledge that there's a real demand and interest out there amongst our farmers for more knowledge and support. Particularly many of those women farmers were really interested in actually having more knowledge and more outreach. So what do you think? If you want to share your thoughts in the chat box, we'd really love to hear them. And what we'd really like to do now is invite our panel to join us. And our panel is actually made up of 4 members today. We've got Wilma Riano from the Philippines, Dr. Kim Seng Hian from IDA Cambodia, Erwina Putri from Rikolto Indonesia, and Sylvie Desilles from manager from the East West Seed Knowledge Transfer. If you could just put your cameras on, that would be great. Our esteemed members of our panel. And I'm just going to change my screen because I can't see here we go. I can see you all looking absolutely lovely. And I'm just going to go back because I've gone one too many. Thank you so much for joining us. I guess you've already seen much of the presentations now. You've got a bit of an idea and you've been joining us for some of the work previously. I've got a few questions for each of you. And maybe I could start with Kim. Kim, what do you see as the different roles that women play in managing plant health and pests and diseases in Cambodia?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Allison, for having me here. So to answer your question, if we look generally like the role for men and women in agriculture in Cambodia, are almost clearly defined, like men responsible for heavy lifting work, like land preparation, bed raising, and installation of irrigation system, and also pest and disease management, where women more on how to say less weightlifting work, but more like detail oriented but time consuming, like seed sowing, transplanting, and pruning, harvesting, and also marketing of the crop. And specifically when we look at men and women jointly operating the farm, so like for plant health, pest and disease, like men play more role, like including like identification of pests and disease and the control, getting information, and also like sometimes even like buying the pesticide and applying. But if we look at the detail, actually, because women in Cambodia and also maybe in some country in the region, they control the budget of the family. So actually they also play very important role in decision making. And also because women often go to market more than men, so they also have husband to buying the pesticide, where they interact more with pesticide seller or sometimes with other farmers. So they make decision on what to buy and quantity as well. And also some serious case that we look at, because the men will do all the spraying. So women think that all they can do is helping the husband mixing the pesticide. They don't even know that the mixing actually is more dangerous than the spraying. So we also working with women on that. And specifically for our work, we have been working promoting IPM for more than 5 years. So we see the difference between farm led by women and farm led by men in general. And women in general provided better result, good result, because IPM work is more detail oriented. It's required like a lot of time, because for us our IPM package, including like set up the nursery seedling and raising the healthy seedling, because that's very important. So women usually handle those jobs and we work with them. So and the important, we try to educate them that when they raise healthy seedling, they will have healthy plant. And as a result, they might spray like as well. So
great.
Just to sort that. So thank you.
No, that's perfect, Kim. That's excellent feedback. It's really interesting to have that insight. I'm just going to ask Wilma. Wilma, you're joining us from the Philippines, and you're in government, so it's really great to hear. I think a perspective from somebody who is in policy making. What in the Philippines are some of the ways that you're supporting women or gender inclusive policies in plant health and pest and disease management?
Thank you, Dr. Allison. Good afternoon to all. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to highlight Philippine women in international forum. So The Philippines is the first in Southeast Asia that signified support to gender and development, leading to advancement and empowerment of Philippine women. And the government had enacted various legislative mandates for Philippine women to equal access to rural and agricultural resources, such as land, farm inputs, loans, training, and others. To name some of these laws, we have Philippine Development for Women, which form the focal points for gender and development. Number two, we have Women and Development and Nation Building Act, which allowed women to access agricultural credits. Then we have the Magna Carta for Women, which require women equal representation in all local bodies. And we have also the Philippine Plan for Gender-Responsive Development, which require agriculture-related agencies like Department of Agrarian Reform, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Environment and Natural Resources to form gender and development focal points. And we have the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, which gave women rights to own land. And though these laws does not specify the rights of women to the management of plant, pest, and disease management, it is included in all those laws. So just last December too, we have the awarding of our outstanding women in agriculture and fisheries sector, and this is a yearly event. So in the Philippines, women have they have more control over management of household expenses. So women activities in crop production include seeding, weeding, pest management. They include pesticide application, harvesting, and marketing. Women also play an active role in agricultural groups, attending trainings, sharing and access to privileges and benefits of different farmers. And in my groups in the Department of Agriculture, we have 16 regions in the regional crop protection centers within each region. And out of these 16 regions, 10 of them are headed by women. And these women are advocates of integrated pest management, which is founded on biological control. Okay. Each regional crop protection center has biocontrol rearing facility. And these women are the one giving decisions in their respective regions. They know how to coordinate with the local government, who are mostly men. With these women, we started to develop the IPM, what we call the IPM PAMS. PAMS stands for Prevention, Avoidance, Monitoring, Suppression in Pest Management. So we do this in FAO. For example, what is best for FAO for prevention, for avoidance, for monitoring, and suppression. So we have some already PAMS for several pests. And
well, I'm just going to have to stop you soon because I need to carry on. But just quickly, I mean, it's really interesting. I'm just going to make one comment, is that I see a lot of projects in the Philippines, and women are actually make up the majority of the trainers and the researchers. So something's going pretty good there, because you've obviously got a lot of capability that's been built up in women researchers and trainers. So I'd like to make that comment. Wilma, I'm just going to have to move on to two other speakers. I may have time to come back to you, but thank you. And it's really important to see all that policy that is behind the work that the Philippines is investing into gender. So that's great to see. Sylvie, you're from East West Seed. You work in East West Seed, the knowledge transfer part of that. How does East West Seed encourage women participation in your programs?
So, thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Alison. Hello, everyone. So what we've been doing with East West Seed knowledge transfer this year is we've run workshops in different countries and at the group level to really see how we can encourage women participation, because that's not very easy. So in 2 minutes, this is a little bit what came up. First, at the strategic level, it's very important. So we have a plan now for 5 years where we want at least 50% in all the countries we're working that are women from the total trained farmers, and 50% of all the key farmers, so the proxies, but training also people in their community. But each country develop their own roadmap because it's very contextual. It's not easy just to find one way to do everywhere. So what we ask is in each country, they identify the main challenge for women to access technical knowledge and make the decision in managing the vegetable crop and getting the benefits. So they find entry points, and these entry points can be home garden or can be also small scale commercial farming. And they put in place a setup where women will have complete control of their learning. And we reinforce this, and we want to push more women to be a resource person and to be placed strategically and geographically. So they become a kind of network of influencers that are very well trained and able to train others. And this is very important geographically because in many areas, women have limited mobility. So we want to bring the knowledge to them. And this is possible through these proxies. And these proxies also are very important in the community to keep a very good dialogue with the leaders and with any polity, with the community. So we don't have miscommunication on what we are doing.
Yep.
Another path we want to look at is really the communication, digital communication, to lower cultural barriers. So it's not necessarily using smartphone. I think I agree with Nozomi. It's more also identifying existing accessible communication channel that women use and amplifying the quality and the quantity of information and knowledge shared via them. And the last thing, one of the last things we look at, and it's very important, is to link the woman and the women group with traders and agro-input dealers. So getting the women farmers recognized as a key players in the vegetable value chain. So these are some ideas we are developing in each country.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sylvie. That sounds great. And I'm just going to move on to Erwina now. Erwina, it'd be really interesting to hear from you what you think of the different roles you see women playing in managing plant pests and diseases in the rice sector. Can you give us a little bit of discussion about that?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Alison. Thank you for being here. Actually, maybe it's not my sharing is not far from other country, other region, because yes, as we know that in Indonesia, actually agriculture related to men, and what actually based on the survey on 2015 by National Survey, actually women has more than 40% of role in the activity in agriculture. For instance, especially in the rice cultivation in Central Java, involve women in transplanting, especially in supplying food for higher labors, weeding, harvesting, drying, and of course also selling the harvest. And the rest is done by the men. Beside that, beside the activity done by the women in the rice cultivation, they also have role in the decision making. Actually, I agree with previous presentation that a woman has control in the household budget. It happened also in Indonesia. I mean, when women have like influence to husband what to buy, especially like when they choose a seed, suitable pest resistant seed, maybe they will discuss with wife, and also when the want to decide time to weeding, time to do spray pesticide, to buy what kind of pesticide, they also actually discuss with his wife, because women as a household budget holder. But generally we only see that only men seen as the person who did the activity in the agriculture. Now that's why what we can do here is to actually Rikolto here wants to give more knowledge actually to the women, to when they want to help his husband to decide something, or when they are involved to decision making, the women will give good, good reason or good knowledge about that. So we are trying to invite women in the training that we held about IPM here, and but initially we separate between training in mixed with men and women. So we have to make it different. Initially we invite only women, because usually women getting shy first. If the participant also and there is a man there, so it's better if separate training. So besides that, we also consider also about the time that we have should be suitable with the household activity, because that's also the responsibility of women. And also the material given also, it's not, I mean, maybe in a easy way, so easy also to understand by the women. That's what we do actually in a simple way to like introduce IPM to the women.
Thanks, Erwina. That's actually really interesting and really important insight. And I've actually been involved in some of these discussions as well around how do you offer training? Do you have mixed training? Do you have women training? Do you have male training? I think that's a really important discussion item, and we'll follow that up in a new workshop, I think, next year. But if you've got any thoughts on that, please put that in the chat box. What has worked well for you and your situations for all the participants out there. Thank you, Erwina. I'm just going to actually move on to our next speaker, Nozomi. I'm still going to come back to you because I've got a really important question for you as well. But I do need to just make up a little bit of time, so bear with me, everyone. I'd like to thank all the panelists for joining the panel. It's really important to hear these different perspectives, and it's really great to have you join us and be part of this program. Thank you all. And now I'd like to introduce our final speaker, but we're going to have a summary by Thelma at the end. But I'd like to introduce Dr. Revi Sterling, Director of USAID's Women Connect Challenge. And Revi brings many years of experience to work from her work to help close the gender divide with a focus on digital solutions. She's joining us from the middle of her night. So welcome, Revi, and we're so glad you could join us. And I'll just stop sharing, and if you could load your presentation, that would be great.
Absolutely. We've only been doing this for 2 years, right? So I can figure out how to share a screen.
And you're a digital person too, so we're expecting high.
You know, sometimes. Let's see. Let me make sure I get this up and going.
So while
everybody, this has been so fascinating. I didn't know really what to expect, since I'm not an agriculture person, but I'm blown away by how many commonalities there are with all of our work. And as the first woman said from CGIAR, it really takes that combination of gender people and the technical people to do this kind of work. So it's fascinating. Now, are you able to see my slides?
Yep, we are definitely.
Oh, yay. Okay, good. Now I just have to figure out how to minimize myself a bit. I'll keep myself up a bit, but wonderful. So anyhow, Allison, thank you so much for inviting me to do this. My name is Revi Sterling, and I met Allison a few months ago. We were talking about really this hype of the digital apps, right? And how everything in the development industry keeps moving towards digital, and who is being left behind, and how we design specifically for women, especially women in agriculture. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of my journey in this space. I've been doing work in digital inclusion for a little over 20 years, first at Microsoft Research and out of the Bangalore, their India labs, then as a professor at the University of Colorado. And then the last 6 years, I've been running gender, technology, and development programs for USAID through a variety of mechanisms. This one is through DAI. But to start with, to me, there's no greater force, there's no greater two forces for change than women and technology. That's my take on it. That's been my experience. I think, we all know that women are the key to sustainable long-term change and development in their communities. They're in charge of, as we've seen today, the budgets, the education, the health of the household. At the same time, we have technology that's enabling us to scale and sustain projects like never before. And this should be a no-brainer. We should be doing this force multiplier of women in technology just everywhere all the time, as some people have even alluded to their amazing programs. I've been taking a ton of notes, so I hope people don't mind when I follow up with you on the panel. The problem is digital technology keeps failing women, which means technologists keep failing women. It's not the part, it's not the problem of the technology. It's the fact that people are gender blind in the tech space. We have this discourse that technology is gender blind, as our second speaker talked about, and then women get forgotten. And, you know, I have faced this for, you know, 25 years of trying to get people to understand the gender differences when it comes to tools and technology and information services. But at the end of the day, if women are still excluded from the benefits of technology because of all sorts of reasons that are very it's just part of being female, as we'll talk about, just the, you know, the gender discourses, the power dynamics, the gender dynamics in communities. If we keep marginalizing women, we're never going to have equitable development when it comes to tools and technologies. And so this idea of digital divides and digital disconnects really has motivated me for quite a long time to figure out, how do we appropriately and sustainably and equitably bring women online? Because what I see again and again, like many of you always see, it's the men that are the early adopters. It's the men that have the smartphones. Different studies have shown that 30% of smartphones that are given to women are reappropriated or sold by family members right off the bat. So even on these programs where, you know, there's phone giveaways and subsidized phones and airtime, it's not like women are necessarily the direct beneficiaries of those. I work in a lot of programs. What I really love to do is work in communities where women have been entirely excluded from using technology, either by local decrees, you know, having people that say, community leaders and religious leaders that say things like the internet is immoral and thus you cannot be on it. And so what really I've been focusing on is the fact that there are millions of women, of course, you know, we see poor women with phones all over the place. We always see all the pictures of, women and girls with phones, they're doing everything else, but there's close to 1 billion women who have never used a phone. You know, we know that half the population of the world has never used the internet. So obviously current efforts are failing. And I wrote about this last year on why women aren't using your agriculture app. And it was a blog that I wrote just in pure frustration of the fact that USAID and other donor communities kept pushing these challenges that were based on smartphones, based on constant connectivity, et cetera. And the fact is, digital empowerment does not necessarily mean you have to be connected. I look at something like the Amplio talking book right here in this picture, which has been deployed in many agricultural settings around the world for places that are off the cellular and electrical grid, or where the cost of data connectivity is far too high, or where the communities speak, 100% oral only languages that aren't even represented on the internet. So there are a lot of technologies out there that are probably more appropriate to low resource, low literacy, low agency populations, but we keep getting stuck on this model of the smartphone, the app, et cetera. And I really feel like it's my mission to go around and widen people's perspectives to say that's not always the best case. And we've known probably since, the first writings on the gender digital divide in kind of 1997, 1998 from people like Nancy Hafkin and Sophia Heyer and other people that are probably very familiar to the gender people on this. We've known what these issues are about the gender digital divide from the very beginning. In fact, they were predicted and they've come true again and again. It's this tautological system where all the barriers are usually listed, right? It's cost, it's literacy, it's mobility, it's perceived relevance. And a lot of organizations focus very specifically on those things. It's easy to address cost. You just subsidize the phone. It's easy to do digital literacy, they think, but it's actually not, because so many of the digital literacy programs are just not even appropriate for the communities that would use them. All of these come down to what I think is the root cause are these social norms. And that's been talked about quite a bit in this program in different ways. When we talk about culture and society, different panelists have been bringing this up. So for me, most of this list are symptoms of social norm inequities. And this is somehow new to technologists. In fact, recently I'm getting so much more interested in this. Tell me about these social norms. And I'm thinking, my goodness, gender and development organizations have been focused on this for many decades, and the technologists are quite late to the game. That really prompted me when I was at the university to write a concept note that USAID decided to engage with me on and bring me out to DC, called the Women Connect Challenge. And it really focused on getting to the root of those social norms and understanding under what conditions could women ever use technology in certain places where patriarchal societies prohibited them from, where the cost was always going to be too extreme to bear, or in places where there simply wasn't going to be any connectivity coverage because mobile network operators saw no commercial value to being out in those places. And it started off with round 1. Now we're on 5 rounds with different partners. So it has kind of taken off a life of its own, but it's been such an amazing experience to work mostly with smaller community-based organizations. And that's another thing I've been really pushing for, even though some of the organizations on here are familiar to all of us. Some are quite small and community-based. And that's something I really want to keep promoting within the team that I work with in USAID and DAI is stop working with the big folks, work with the people on the ground that really know those gender considerations. As part of the RFA, it was a requirement to really talk about how do you know the gender dynamics in these communities? How can you explain to me how you know them? Because it's not about the technology, it's about the people. And it really comes down to, none of these are new to probably anybody, but they keep going back to things that we've talked about throughout this workshop. It's confidence, it's changing social norms, it's creating the economic opportunities, it's having that community support network. And one that's really important to me and it really drives my career is creating technologies that women want and they want to use and they're able to use. And what does that actually mean? Does that mean that it has to be a text-free user interface for low literacy populations? Does it mean that they need to have their husband's approval when they go and search on things, and he needs to be part of the equation and mirror the screen to see what he's doing, et cetera? So a lot of it means working directly with women, but also much more the gatekeepers against women's economic information empowerment to help them understand that there are the economic and then the community benefits of women being online. And I think this is really, germane in the agriculture space, because obviously there's such a push for digital applications. And the last 3 weeks I've been in Uganda, where I've probably interviewed 600 rural women, and none of them have used a digital development application besides WhatsApp. So, part of me has to report that back and say, you're putting all this money, especially in places like the Rift Valley and Kenya and Uganda, into agriculture applications that no one is using, especially not women. So let's get to the root of why we have, again, this disconnect of technology not serving the women that it really needs to. So I'm going to briefly talk about these 5 proven strategies and projects that I want to highlight in case there's anything from them that you can glean and apply in your projects. And do stay in touch with me afterwards. I love talking about this. I'd love to brainstorm with you on what might work in your organization or in certain community contexts. For changing social norms, I want to talk about a project in northern Nigeria where local clerics had banned women's internet use. And what we did with this was we did a whole family training for 16 weeks. So husbands, their wives, their children, they all came to a training center so that husbands could really understand what this internet thing was and how it could be beneficial to the family. And there were workshops that took them through the risks, how to mitigate the risks, the benefits. And then there was also an accompanying program with these clerics and other scholars and gender experts in the area where there was a debate about the role of technology in the families. And this went on for about a year and a half and reached an audience of over 9 million people. So you had the very micro level intervention, and you had this kind of macro level debate at the same time. And it's interesting that 5% of husbands said they would let their wives use the internet and have a phone at the beginning of the training, and at the end 95% did. Another one is something we've been doing in India with several projects, has been looking at understanding what creating economic opportunities look like, because the fact is that just because you have an internet connection doesn't mean you're going to have a thriving internet commerce storefront on Etsy or Amazon, things like that, because the trades, the tariffs, the logistics are just beyond the reach and capacity of a lot of communities. Also, what I found in working in northern Bihar with several of our organizations, were so many women that couldn't leave their house. They could perhaps go out to a field to work, they could work in their home garden, but for all sorts of cultural and social reasons, they literally had an incredibly isolated life. So what are the opportunities there? And in here, we were working with them to understand what kind of government schemes were available, what they could do training-wise in their home if materials were brought to them, and to also lower the total cost of ownership of phone and information access by offering offline clouds and offline content, so that we could make sure that people aren't paying an additional tax just to connect to services that the rest of us take for granted, and also to have knowledge that the rest of us, learned in school. So if you can't leave your house, how do you learn? And learning shouldn't necessarily be that expense thing that makes the difference between, yes, I'm going to do this, and no, I'm not. One of the things we keep running into, and it's come up a few times in this workshop, has been women's confidence and how important that is. I mean, I talk to women all the time who say, I'm too dumb to use my phone. And I'm like, wait a minute, you raise all of these crops, you raise kids, you've gotten through COVID. Yes, you're smart enough to use, a smartphone, or you're smart enough to use the internet. But they say things like, my phone speaks a different language than me because it's a hand-me-down phone from somebody that migrated from another area, etc. So with Viamo, we use their 321 service to create in Tanzania and Pakistan a service where people could call in and just understand, what is this internet thing? What is a social network? What's in it for me? What are the risks? How can I even get started? How do I, know if my phone can do this? And it was almost pre-digital literacy training so that women could have the options, because there are so many digital interventions that come through. And so many women just say, that's not for me. And this way it gave them at least a starting point to say, maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. And in the first 6 months of that trial, we had over 250,000 women from Tanzania call in and get information about just what does it mean to be digital. This is one of my favorite projects. This is working with women's collectives in Bamako, Mali, in 5 slums. And what they really wanted was health and market information. And they all speak Bambara. 97% of them were illiterate. There's not a lot of Bambara content online. So we worked with them to understand what they liked from WhatsApp, what they liked from Facebook, different things that we showed them that they weren't necessarily familiar with, because the smartphones, maybe there's, one per VSLA or one per women's group. It's a shared commodity. These things are not in people's hands individually. So we did workshops to understand what really designing with end users meant. It's one of the digital development principles, but it's one of those things that's really hard to do because it takes time and it takes patience and it takes understanding cultural nuances that are going to be lost to me forever as an outsider, but finding internal, sociologists and anthropologists in the country that could really help translate these things, that we came up with, a visual and voice-based social network that worked entirely offline in a system of message exchanges. And then this network really took off during COVID time. And the women have just really loved it. And we've been able to find them some other donors for phones. And especially in COVID, they've been able to use it to make sure they had accurate information. They could find out where vaccines were, school closures, etc. And then my last example with community support, this is an agricultural region in Morocco, in Midelt. It's Morocco's largest apple producing region, but it was completely off the mobile network operator landscape. Cost for data was just too high, and thus there was no internet. People were obviously at the whims of middlemen who had better technology and services and access to market information. So the community women got together with women from 4 other countries through a program called an organization called AFCHICS out of Nairobi, and they learned how to deploy their own ISP, their own internet service provider, services as a community network to the community. And what was fabulous is not only were these women bringing in internet and rural electrification for the first time, because obviously you need the power to run a community network, there was almost no backlash from men because they were just so delighted to have the information. So if you do this thoughtfully, if you understand the social norms, if you understand the trade-offs, if you're working with mostly the gatekeepers to understand under what conditions this could work, this is where I think we have the biggest chance in changing the social norms around technology use. And that's going to be more and more critical because, as we know, donors and partners love this digital space. And it's hard for them to understand that not all women have smartphones and tablets and all the time in the world to train and use these things. So we can work on that end in helping to educate the donors and the partners, but at the same time, we can help women in communities really ready themselves to understand what the benefit of digital is. And then it's really their choice if they want to participate or not. And to me, that's really the essence of development. So there are a few resources I'm putting up here from USAID that my team and I have worked on over the last few years. But I would really just love to stay in touch. Questions you have, ideas you have, technologies. I mean, I really feel like I've got in my brain about 23 years of failures and successes in this space. So thank you so much for giving me an education in IPM and understanding that this is an area in ag tech that I need to look at and be more aware of myself. So I'll stop now and turn it back over to Allison and see if anybody had any comments. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Revi. And actually, there's lots of comments coming
Oh,
through.
no. Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah. No, don't say, oh, no. Oh, yes. That's great.
Okay.
And I've got a question here from, I think it's from Yvonne. She was wondering why women use WhatsApp, but not other apps.
I think it's just, when I talk to them, the usability of it is so easy and they feel like they trust it. It's just, it seems very like, a communal technology that for some reason they trust more than Facebook. They don't feel like they get scammed as often on it. They don't feel like they've been harassed on it as much, although people do say, yes, I do get strange calls, etc. But for some reason, WhatsApp has just taken off. And it's interesting because I know of a lot of people that are writing, they're looking into why this is the case, because now we can't ignore it. It's not a fad. So I think more and more research will come out of that from the science, technology, and society world. But I really think that vendors that have been very focused on having their own applications as a standalone on phones are realizing they need to package it with WhatsApp. So I'm watching like Demagi and CARE and CellEd and other NGOs and commercial, education platforms say, oh my gosh, this is sticking around. We're going to move our app to a WhatsApp platform. So for some reason, it just seems to be the hot commodity right now. Yes.
And here's a question from Bethel. She just wants to know, is there material you can share about the design creative tech for women in, I think it's Mali. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'd absolutely love to.
Yep.
Let me follow up directly. I have data sheets on all of these projects, and obviously I was only able to give it, a few minutes of it, but I'm also happy to connect people with the orgs that are doing this work.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And yes, WhatsApp does belong to Facebook. Yes, it's interesting, but no one else seems to really know that. And now we have to call it Meta. Right now we live in the metaverse.
That's true. Tell me, here's a question. I mean, you just talked about some of the lessons, I guess. I mean, you've had some failures. I think I heard the failure in your sentence before. What are some of the a practical tip, some of the sort of key things that you've learned around successfully reaching out to women or ways to encourage them to participate in your projects?
Well, I think that, there's the biggest thing has been around, looking at the cultural norms and social norms and trying to understand what even makes sense for women in these contexts. What are their, how do the social norms line up against what their priorities and ambitions and aspirations are, and then trying to find that sweet spot, because there's obviously a set of rules in which people have to behave in a certain society. That there's lots of villages across northern India that have banned mobile cell phone use for women, and here's the world's largest democracy. So what do you do with the local context, and what do you do with women's aspirations? And you try to find that place in the middle where both can be served to a degree until people realize that, wow, this isn't that unsafe. Wow, the internet is just a tool like anything else. It can be used for bad. It can be used for good. Unfortunately, when it's used for bad against women, it can be incredibly detrimental, right? I mean, we've seen honor killings over the use of, phones. We see the harassment online of women. We see the pornography, et cetera. So it really can be a minefield, but I think that's really where it comes in with really thoughtful partners. And maybe you do it in a more in a safer group setting as opposed to individuals, where you're working with, village savings and loans and women's self-help groups and agriculture collectives to say, hey, we're going to use it first and foremost for this. And then let's see if it makes sense in an educational setting or a women's health setting or those kind of things. But yeah.
And and I guess just closing, what are some of the sort of challenges for you when the hardest challenges for you when you're developing these projects? I guess, what are some of the barriers that you find are really?
I think the hardest thing is for me to get out of the way. And, because I have lots of ideas, I've seen lots of projects, but at the end of the day, if this isn't useful and interesting and fits the preferences and the needs of the women we're trying to serve, it's completely pointless. So yes, I can have a million ideas for apps and services, but what's really important is to go and try to understand the digital ecosystem in communities and listen. I mean, we know that, we've heard that again through this workshop, but women know what they want. They know their threshold for risk. They know what their husbands and mother-in-laws and employers will say. And so they are the trove of information. And what I need to do and try to help other technologists understand is that has to drive the design process. I can sit here and be like, oh, we could use blockchain for this. Well, if the world burns up in climate change, blockchain isn't going to be very useful. So, we need to be, technologists need to be more relevant, and we need to be much better listeners, especially to development domains like agriculture and the expertise of gender and development organizations. Us technologists like to think we have the answers to everything. And in fact, no, we just seem to, we're just nerds. We're just nerds that have good hearts, but we just really need to listen a lot more.
Excellent. That's an excellent, I think, summary actually, and really virtually a good launch pad to our last speaker. But Revi, that was a really, I think, pertinent piece of information to take on board around that importance of actually listening to women and actually understanding what works for them, because they know around what they can adapt to and adopt, and they're the ones that should be leading this from their perspective. So it's great to have people like you supporting that process, and thank you so much for joining us. It's really a big thing to join us in the middle of your night, and we really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, anytime. Yep. I got to learn so much. I'm going to bug all your other panelists, and it was really an honor, and I'm going to go through the other Q&A right now. So thank you so much, everybody.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm going to introduce now our esteemed researcher, Dr. Thelma Paris, whose research has been conducted across Southeast Asia and South Asia in collaboration with many research partners over the years. And she's done a lot of work in participatory research in rice improvement, crop production, post-harvest, large-scale technology dissemination, has been a leading figure in discussing and encouraging gender lens in our research and our projects. It's a huge pleasure actually to have you join us, Thelma, and to share some closing thoughts for the session. Thelma.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank Alison for inviting me to join in this exciting event. I'm sure that you agree with me that we have all learned a lot from the rich experiences and insights from our outstanding speakers this afternoon. In fact, I am suffering from information overload. No? So much to learn, so much. But then I'm not going to talk about what we have done. Maybe we can have that in the discussions, because I would like to be more of a forward-looking. And I'm glad that the first session was opened by Dr. Nicoline Haan, because CGIAR is a very important and a big research organization, which has a strong collaboration with NARS partners and also NGOs. But then what is very important in her presentation is that we need to generate new evidence and directions for equitable results. And why is there a need for solid gender transformative and social inclusion approaches particularly for IPM? So the most important term now is the word transformation, because it is not easy. There are deeply rooted sociocultural norms and beliefs, attitudes, not only of the scientists, but also our research partners and so forth. So we have to weave through the system. And based on my experience, it is not easy. But there are a lot of challenges, but we also have some successes. So what I've learned from Nicole is that she posed a lot of questions. For example, is how can we ensure that women's and men's knowledge are incorporated in the CGIAR's goals? And how can we actually empower women by giving them opportunities? And how can they be, and how can we measure empowerment? So we need a lot of evidence, particularly when you work with the CGIAR, because the scientists are always after evidence and systematic way of doing research. I would like to give you a story. When I did my study in India, I collected a lot of data, labor data, and my colleague asked me, are you not going to present your paper in the technical meeting on stress, developing varieties for stress-tolerant varieties? I said, no, because nobody invited me. And he said, so who gets stressed when the plant or rice gets stressed due to drought? And then I thought, yeah, women, because when the plant gets stressed, they cannot transplant and they cannot harvest. They don't have any food for the family and they have to borrow food and so forth. So finally, I collected all my data, very good data by caste, by rice, by crops and so forth. And I presented this in the male-dominated technical conference. And you know what? And a research manager from a big research institute slipped a note on my desk on the seat, and he said, Thelma, you are very emotional. So that means that even if you collect data, they think that when you talk about gender issues, you are very emotional. And that was what Dr. Nicoline said, that yes, it is very, other people think that we are using only our emotion. And therefore, when we present our papers in technical conferences, we have to show evidence, hard evidence. And it should be by production. It should be very systematic by production systems, so in a given context and so forth. So women, when we talk about women in disease and pest management, these are the invisible participation of women. Because when we collect labor data, we only collect the labor data from land preparation, weeding, so forth, after harvesting, but not much in disease and pest management, because as you have listened or heard, women play a different role in disease and pest management. In the Philippines, for example, the women are, or in other countries in Southeast Asia, the women are custodians of household cash. And therefore, they are in charge in budgeting. In the Philippines, they do the marketing. So part of the marketing activity, they buy the pesticides and so forth, but they do not know the levels of toxicity. They don't know which pesticides are banned and so forth. They wash the clothes of the spouses and so forth. So they are prone to the negative effects or consequences of pesticide use. In Vietnam, I saw few women applying or using the knapsack sprayer, and they themselves use pesticides. In Indonesia, I also saw women spraying soybean in other crops like cowpea, soybean, and so forth. So there are different roles of women and men in pesticide and in disease, pest and disease management. And the challenge is, how do we make this invisible participation visible in our statistics or in our research? how do we change the norms and values and develop and to be able to give economic, not only economic incentives to women. What are the benefits or incentives for women to be able to join or practice IPM? So we need to be engaged. We need to have good data, and so that technology should benefit women rather for them to suffer the negative consequences of technologies. The next speaker, Nozomi, I really enjoyed Nozomi's presentation because she has a way of.
We just have 1 minute left, so I'm just.
So for the presentations of Nozomi, she presented the results of her research and also the key messages of her research studies. I also we also learned what is going on in different countries in Southeast Asia, and also the lessons from in designing and implementing projects to empower women. I particularly enjoyed the challenges, the strategies for bridging the digital divide. For example, I myself use the apps for identifying plants, and that can also be used in identifying pests and diseases. And since I don't have any more time, I would like to congratulate everybody for sharing the results of our studies. And these studies are very useful in paving the way, or for particularly in empowering women. And the challenge for empowering women is how do we measure that these women are really empowered? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thelma. That was brilliant. And I know it's very hard coming at the end, particularly after all those amazing presentations, and there's so much information, and I may have unpacked way too much in there, but it's great to have a session to sort of catalyze discussion, and it certainly has, because in the chat box, it's been full of people sharing their points all through the session. So thank you very much, Thelma, and I'm sure we'll come back to actually get more of your knowledge and have further time next year. So we really appreciate you joining us today. It's great to have somebody with so much knowledge and experience across the region. So we really appreciate it. And that draws our session to a close. I'd just like to thank everyone for attending today. Huge thank you, especially to our speakers who have joined us and graciously shared their expertise and insight with us all. I'd also like to thank you for your participation, and we look forward to developing this program with everyone in a very inclusive manner over the next 3 years. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any ideas, or you want to participate, or you've got experience or knowledge that you want to share with the team. I would like to wish you all a very safe and happy end of the year, as this is our last workshop almost. So please take care. And if you could, before you go, I'm just going to launch a poll, or I'm not sure if Pranav's still there, but Pranav's, oh, look, he's so efficient. He's put it up straight away. I would really appreciate if you could take your time to just answer that. And a big thank you to all the project team. There has actually been a project team behind this that has been helping over the last 6 months, and I really appreciate all those members. It was a great session today. We had a lot of people join us. I think we got up to 160 plus, so that's amazing. And thank you very much, and keep safe, everyone. Thank you. Bye.